Hello viewer, Eric the Car Guy here. How are you? Today we've got American car. We got, I don't know, I'd have to check the year, but it's a GMC Jimmy. It has a Vortec, I believe 4.3 liter engine in it. And the complaint is that there is difficulty starting on cold days. That's about all I got. And guess what? It's warm today. And it's been starting up every time. Don't you just love intermittent problems? I am gonna take this opportunity just to walk you through what I would do in this situation. I really don't know where this video is gonna go necessarily. I'm just gonna, do a few checks and poke at it a little bit and see if I can find something to give me some sort of clue as to why it would do that. So why don't we head over to the car or in this case, truck, see if we can find anything in there to give us any clues as to what's going on with it. All right, I found out the year. It is a 1999, and it is a 4.3 liter Vortec engine, as you can see. And I'm just gonna start with just a general visual inspection. I'm just gonna look for clues. It never hurts to check the oil and see what kind of shape that's in. It's looking, about normal. Doesn't look that old. Doesn't look that bad. It's a little bit low. Not so low that I would think, there's no oil in it. I'd be looking for like any kind of chocolate milk kind of stuff, which might indicate coolant contamination or moisture contamination. Another place to look is just down inside the radiator. Oh, yay. Gotta love that. Let's see what we got. Yep. There ain't a whole lot of coolant in there, so that's cause for concern. And the coolant that is in there is looking, oh, lovely. So we will put that on our list of things to check. One thing that I always like to check for on anything with a mass airflow sensor, a MAF sensor, which is this guy. Anything with a MAF sensor on it, I've said this before in other videos, if you've got any leaks, anything from here down to the engine, or any vacuum leaks on top of that, that's air that this sensor didn't measure. And the computer looks at this sensor, measures the air going into the engine, and calculates a fuel mixture accordingly. So any air that's sneaking in that's not accounted for by the sensor is air that doesn't have enough fuel to go with it. So in essence, it runs lean, and they call that pirate air. I just look around this area, see if there's any cracks, see if it's loose. It looks, well, slightly loose. It doesn't look like it's sealing that well here on top of the engine. Anything in this fresh air for the PCB, that's all hooked up correctly, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for stuff that might not be hooked up correctly, that kind of thing. And even though the engine isn't running, I'm just gonna check the transmission fluid quick, even though I know it has nothing to do with it. But in a way, if you get a look at the fluids in a vehicle and just sort of check their condition, you can sort of get a feel for the overall condition. And yet, I'm not checking this correctly. I'm just looking at the fluid itself to see what kind of shape it's in. And it's got a nice reddish color. It looks like a relatively new cap and rotor ignition parts. It's hard to see too much down inside of here with the oil cap. But you can look down inside the oil hole. And I actually did a video on that, that I'll post a link in the description to you. It's called Looking into the Horse's Mouth. You can tell a lot about what kind of condition an engine is in just by looking into the oil cap. And if you see that it's all crusty up inside, well, that might indicate a poor service history, which could mean that the problems are mechanical, not necessarily anything else. If you have a performance problem with a worn out engine, you kind of have to address the worn out engine first. So we're really not seeing anything here that's like sticking out. So I'm gonna, one, start it up, and two, let's plug a scanner in and see if we got any codes or anything like that. Like the steering wheel cover? Thought you might like that. Ooh, didn't mean to start it. Even if you don't have a check engine light illuminated, which this one was not, it might have a code stored in the computer. So it's a good idea just to check to see if you have any codes, because they may not be being displayed. So I'll just hit my button. and it looks like, yeah, there are no codes found. It's a pass. So let's take it one step further. This scanner actually has the ability to look at the live data, and I can run the engine and see what the engine sees, and perhaps that can give us some clue as to where to look. All right, you want to see?
All right, here's what I'm seeing. I actually had it running for a little bit before, just because I was trying to start it up. So that's why my coolant temp was up. Coolant temp looks, you know, about normal. The middle light is off. The throttle position sensor, we can blip that. So we know that that's getting a signal and doing its thing. The MAF readings are there, coolant temp. But what I really want to look at, and this is why I'm here, is the fuel trim readings, which are coming up. Yeah, these fuel trim readings. ST is short term, LT is long term, and I'm going to assume that one of these is like bank 1 and one is bank 2. And it's interesting because it looks like you want these numbers to be as close to 0 as possible. Any positive numbers means it's adding fuel. Any negative numbers, it means it's taking fuel away. So if you see positive numbers, it could have something like a vacuum leak or maybe an injector that's not working and not adding enough fuel. But this is interesting. The long term on bank 2, I guess, is about 5.5. Like I said, it should be about 0 because look at what it is up here on this one. It is 0. So long term on this other bank just shows 0, and it's adjusting, and you will see the short term adjust a little bit. But this long term on this one that says that it's about 5.5 and looks like it's, you know, it doesn't look like it's changing as much as this one. That says to me that maybe we got a vacuum leak or maybe we got a fuel delivery problem. Even though it seems this engine actually is running pretty smooth. I'm not going to pay too much attention to the rest of this. It doesn't really, this scanner gives me so much. But what it does give me is those long-term and short-term fuel numbers. And I find those to be useful. I really do. Because in this case, I think we're looking at a vacuum leak. So why don't we just see what we can do to check for vacuum leaks around the engine, especially around the intake manifold, and see if we can come up with something. Because this may have a starting problem if it's getting too much air in and it's not getting enough fuel when it's cold. So that may be the cause. As I said, this thing is running pretty smooth. I mean, it doesn't really appear to have a rough idle. It seems to be running all right. I hear a little squeak, maybe that's a belt noise. But other than that, I'm not really noticing anything too out of the ordinary. Instead of in my checking for vacuum leaks video, what I used was carburetor cleaner. And you can totally use carburetor cleaner to check for vacuum leaks, but this time I'm just going to use a little bit of soap and water in a squirt bottle because I'm also going to check the ignition system for any voltage leaks at the same time. So I'll notice an idle change if this water gets into a point to where it seals a vacuum leak. But I'll also notice like a miss or maybe some arcing if there was a voltage leak from the ignition. So I'm kind of doing both at the same time. So I think I'll start like back at the distributor. Also, any place these wires touch metal. Or any place these wires touch each other. It's not missing a beat really. been no change in the way the engine's run. So I don't think we got an ignition problem here. So now let's try around the intake. Second. I hear something. Hear that? Right around the top where the fuel lines come in. I hear something. Yep. And it's running a little rough now. We'll get you a flashlight. All right, right when and you can see where somebody's been in here. The engine's running a little bit rough, and I can sort of hear like a sucking sound, like it's sucking that water in. I believe I do have a vacuum leak here. It's up in this area. And I can definitely see that somebody's been on here. You can see their fingerprints. Somebody's been in here doing stuff. Let's take some stuff apart and get a look at that. I think I'll start by taking this stuff out of the way. Didn't look like that was on there very well. Didn't look like it sealed very well either. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna take this guy out of here. I'm also seeing, looks like a little bit of oil or a coolant leak down in here. I'll show you that in a second. So we might not be out of the woods yet on this intake. But I would first very much like to be able to get this connector off of here. All right, well, I popped this upper cover off, and I think I figured out why I can't unplug this. It's because somebody's glued it together. I just popped this upper plug off. Now, this leaves me to wonder if the vacuum leak is here, which would be strange, but if they glued this down like this, I'm wondering if maybe the connector got damaged or something, or damaged the top of this and is causing a small leak. But I'm going to leave this cover off. You can see it's over there too, and this here. So there's been some gluing going on, and I hate to say it, but I don't believe that this assembly, this fuel injection assembly that I'm looking at, it's called a spider injection system, I believe. I don't think these are serviceable, pretty much. I think that if you have a problem with one, you usually end up replacing it. And I've also heard that if you use the aftermarket versions, that there is a good possibility that it will have a problem. This is not good. So I'm going to try with this cover off, spray a little water down in here, and see what happens. But you can't see the fuel injectors or anything on this. It's all part of an assembly. It's inside this upper part of this intake. This is just the throttle body here. There's the inlet for the idle there. And these are, like, I believe this one back here is the auto control motor, and this one over here is the throttle position sensor, and back here is the map sensor, I believe. Right there.
They also run that in addition to the MAF sensor. I was under the impression for the longest time that if you had a MAF, a mass airflow sensor, that you wouldn't have a MAP sensor, but I'm not seeing that. I'm actually seeing more MAP sensors on cars with mass airflow sensors. So I'm gonna put this back together, spray a little water down in here, and see if I can figure out a change. Yeah, you can't run the engine without this guy. Remember I told you if you had any leaks past the mass airflow sensor, that was a no-no. It'd be great if there was some kind of rubber seal in here. Feels like it's just plastic. Feels like there's no seal here at all. Really. All right, let's start it up. And I'm gonna use carburetor cleaner this time. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but since I've been messing with that whole area, it's starting to run a little bit rougher. I don't know if you hear that. I am convinced. I mean, it did for a second there make a lot of noise. So I think what we're dealing with is a vacuum leak. Whether or not that has anything to do with the difficult starting, I don't know, but it's a known problem. And if I eliminate that, I may eliminate the problem at the same time. So in a situation like this where you can't duplicate the problem, you look for problems, you repair those problems, and cross your fingers that it actually helps with the repair. Something else that's kind of noteworthy on this is that coolant is yuck, and in fact it's extremely low, but I just went in and just for the heck of it, before I shut it off, tried the heat, and it doesn't really have good heat at all. So it's very possible that there's air in the cooling system that we should try and purge out. This air in the cooling system can also affect the coolant temperature sensor. So if this is affected when it's cold, it's got a vacuum leak, it may have a coolant temperature sensor that's not functioning as intended. This could very well be the cause of the problem, which could be plural, vacuum leak and inaccurate coolant temperature sensor readings. So let's explore that theory and do some repairs. Well, you might have guessed it. They're not going to fix it. It would have been nice because these are quite a popular engine, quite a popular vehicle, and I hear tell that this is kind of a common problem with these, just problems with the spider injector assembly itself. One thing to note that I have come to learn is that some of the aftermarket plenums that you can get or spider assemblies that you can get don't necessarily fit as well, or I've heard of problems with them. I've heard of issues with them. So unfortunately, if you find yourself in a similar situation where you've got vacuum leaks or something going on with that fuel injection assembly, it's best if you get an OE part for it. So hopefully you can find a good price on it. As far as salvage yard units go, think about it. If this one has a problem, and it's a common problem, then if you pull one out of salvage, it's quite possible you may end up just with another problem. So take all that into consideration if you find yourself confronted with this. If for whatever reason this thing comes back, well, I'll definitely make a continuation of this video. If not, well, just have to do what I gotta do. Anyway, I am Eric the Car Guy. You can always find me at EricTheCarGuy.com, where you can go and ask your automotive questions using a couple of keywords in our search function there at the top of the homepage. If you don't get an answer there, you can always go over to the forum. It's free to sign up for you, and you need an email address and ask your question there. We'll be happy to help. Other than that, you can find me on Google+, Facebook, and Twitter. And I close with be safe, have fun, and stay dirty. Take care, everybody.